Well, welcome, Sarah, to the Worth Wellness podcast. I'm really excited to have you here and to dive into intuition. As a mommy, I think this is a really interesting topic because we all have this really strong sense, I feel like, as moms. And at first, not all of us go with it. I think there's so much outside input on how to be a good mom and how to be a good parent that it might not be second nature for us to just put all of that aside and focus on intuition as first and foremost the most important. So I want to hear more about why you're passionate about intuition, and specifically for moms and in motherhood. Give us an idea of why you came to this being a really important thing and something you're wanting to help others tap into.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. So, intuition and motherhood is, like you said, it's such a sensitive topic, especially for me. I went through infertility and having to listen to a lot of people tell me all the different things about my body and kind of just taking in all of this information. And it's the same thing, I think, when you become a new mom. It's, sleep training, feeding, all of the different things are forced on you almost. And I think society kind of puts you in this position where it's like, you better be doing it right, the quote unquote right way, or else, your kid is gonna whatever. I think, we're not raised to understand that we can follow our intuition, and that is the biggest thing. So for me, intuition and motherhood has just been like this flower that just keeps on blooming. And I think that, I really do believe that our kids choose us, and
Yeah.
they choose us to help us open up, I think, even more than we already have, open up to our own connection, our own infinite wisdom that we have within us. And our kids are our teachers, and they teach us every day how to dive deeper if we're willing to listen and if we're able to listen. We're not always in the safest spot where we can open up to those pieces within us. So I don't know if that actually answered your question.
Yeah, kind of how you came to it. And I think that's really interesting too. All of these labels that, I mean, you can get into that, like the addiction to struggle and the addiction to being sick and that identity and getting stuck there. But then there's also so many things people tell us that then means about us, what we're going to be able to do and not do in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's get pregnant. I mean, that's one I hear all the time. And one that I was even told, because I have a history with disordered eating. And because of that, I had a lot of just totally irregular cycles and hormonal dysfunction, which I did
Wow.
work with a practitioner to heal beforehand. But I had people, when I was 14 saying you're never going to get pregnant, in the thick of my eating disorder. And so people like to put these things on us
Yeah.
that our diagnosis, they think it means that that's what our future is going to look like. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious for you, did you have a sense when you were going through that they were wrong? I mean, what was your intuition telling you in that period of your life?
Oh man, yeah. So I think that period of my life too I was so disconnected because I felt just so alone, and I was playing into the stories that societies had, given me. I was a little bit older. Egg quality is going down. You have a stressful job. You're drinking. All these things. And so then I had that running dialogue in my head too of if I don't fix this, I can never get pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, when it was a 3 kind of year long thing where I was bouncing from, thing to fix to thing to fix. And finally, my husband and I had been kind of on different, what we thought was going to make us parents. I really wanted to adopt. He really wanted to go the medical
Mm,
route.
yeah.
And it was hard for me my intuition though told me just trust him on this one. Like, and so I did. I didn't want to go through IVF because it is all the hormones that they inject in you. And, for women, it sucks, really, to go
Mm,
through IVF. And, the men don't, I mean, I know that they have a hard time with it, but physically it's not as demanding, I would say, on them.
yeah.
But I trusted him, and we went through. And IVF is too, it's such a numbers game.
Mm,
And it does, I think you can talk yourself out of what your intuition is telling you by looking at numbers and looking at the data, right? If your brain isn't like on this path of like supporting you and the things that you really think, if you have some of those like negative thought patterns, your brain can really quickly take your intuitive sense away from you. And that happened kind of some points, it was like, the number of eggs turned into the number of embryos, turned into the number of things that we could actually transfer once they were unfrozen. Like, and we only had 2 left. And I was like, it was very scary. But my intuition just kept telling me like, no, she's like, my daughter's coming.
Mm.
And I didn't know it at the time, but that I did know it kind of, that I was going to have a girl. And, it just came through, that yes, this will work. Yes, this will work. Yes, this will work. And then it did. And we were very fortunate. First transfer, it all worked. So yeah, I think it is easy to get sidelined by numbers and data and what everybody else is telling you. Like you were saying, oh, you're never going to get pregnant at 14. Like, how are they ever going to be able to like know what the future holds? But, as an impressionable 14-year-old, when your brain's not fully formed, you can take those stories and internalize them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is so funny because I then had this like idea that it's going to be hard for me to get pregnant. And in comparison to, I know what a lot of people face, I'm like, I think I got pregnant relatively easy too. So I'm like, yeah, it is so interesting. I really like too how you just like brought awareness to the fact that IVF, while it can provide families with an opportunity to have kids that couldn't, like, it's not easy for women to go through that. Because I think, I don't know, I don't think that's talked about very much. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I have honestly not heard a lot of women say that. Or even that might be a reason they don't want to go through with it, is just because it's like, it's really hard on women, like on their bodies, like physically.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's a taxing all around, right? Like
Yeah.
emotionally, physically. And I do think it like dampens your spirit too.
Mm.
And I think in the IVF and in the infertility community, it's definitely talked about, right? But outside, like, people just don't understand. And then I think there is also to that societal like pressure of like, okay, well, you have a baby now. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, and I think that's something that a lot of infertility mamas struggle with is like,
Mm.
yeah, I'm so grateful to have this baby, and motherhood is still hard, and IVF
Yeah.
still was hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you have a whole nother period before the pregnancy part to process, and then the birth, and then postpartum. Like if you have the sort of infertility, it's like you have that whole period too now to process of like what it even took to get to the pregnancy part. So it's kind of like you guys have an additional an additional leg on your journey, I feel like.
Yeah, totally.
So you should have permission to like have that, yeah, have that be a part of your story that you're still trying to integrate as a new mom. It all
Totally.
happens so fast, as like once you're pregnant, birth and postpartum. I mean, I remember, and I've been thinking about this a lot, being out of my 4th trimester, how I'm like, I don't even have time like to process the pregnancy and the birth, because like boom, the baby's there, and then it's demand 24/7. Like you can't think about what those other parts were like or anything like that. It's so, yeah, it's so demanding that I think it takes years for a lot of women to process like that whole time period.
Oh my
Sometimes
gosh,
they
yeah.
have to get out of the early years, and then maybe they might realize like, oh, I think there's some stuff I want to go back there and like unpack what
Yeah,
happened.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like just as a societal pressure, like people like think you're weird when you're doing like inner work. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people
Mm-hmm.
are just like, why can't you just get over it? Or why can't you just
Mm-hmm.
move on or whatever? Like I think that's such a stigma around postpartum depression and all those things. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know, as human beings, as emotional beings, we need that time to sit with what is our intuition telling us about what we went through, what are our emotions trying to say. And when we don't get that time, I think you do run into things where, like where you're angry all the time, or you just can't quite like love your kids or whatever the way you want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That makes me think, I'm really curious what you think about this whole idea, but I have heard some people are more like intuitive than other people. Like, do you think that that's a real thing? Or do you think that people in our
Yeah.
society, like we are just so out of touch with like our inner guidance that some people are actually more in touch and others aren't, and that's what's going on? Or is there such a thing as like some people are highly intuitive and others just aren't going to be that way?
Yeah, I definitely agree kind of with what you were saying about like, I think, I think we're all born intuitive. We're all born in touch with our guides and with our spirit and with our intuition and all the things, right? We all have those tools within us. And as we grow up, whether, trauma or just like parents that don't, like, I mean, some parents, like my parents were Catholic
Mm,
and, it just wasn't like in their like growing up or whatever, it wasn't taught that like, hey, you have access to God, like inside yourself. It was like, no, with Catholics, you have to go through the priest to get to God. So I think there are people that are more intuitive, but I think it's because they use those resources that are available. They learn how to access their intuition. Um, and then they like it's like a muscle, you know what I mean? Anything that you use grows. So I would say when I was growing up, I literally, like I said, I grew up Catholic. I had no idea that I had this connection within myself, and it took me until I was in my 30s to
mm,
be like, wait, hey, like maybe like, and not knocking the Catholic religion, but maybe that isn't my cup of tea anymore. Like,
mm.
let me come over here to this other avenue to get the connection, that like Jesus talks about, these things of like this connection to this holy place within me. So I do think, and like I do have friends that grew up where their parents did nurture that connection, and they did. And the thing that I love too about these people is that their parents were nurturing the play aspect of it, this imagination piece. And that, I feel like imagination and intuition is such a hand in hand thing. So when you
Mhm.
have parents that are so willing to encourage that type of behavior, it's easier for you then as an adult to come back to those to those guides or whatever, however your intuition presents itself to you.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting connection between play and intuition because when I think of play, I think of like limitlessness and like anything's possible kind of mentality. And I think if you have a really hard time tapping into that energy, following your intuition is going to be hard because you might intuitively get a sense that something's possible or available to you that your like rational mind says like no, that can't happen.
Mhm.
It's like, so if you're not
Totally.
used to imagining and dreaming bigger than what you see in the physical realm, I think that that could be possibly something that hinders you from following your intuition because everything around you, practically speaking, especially like if you're an adult, you're like, oh well, that doesn't make sense, whereas little
Right.
kids imagining things and playing, like it doesn't make sense, they don't care, that's not a factor in like how they
Right.
play. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. And I think there's a component to intuition that is playful in what could be possible here, and I'm going to go with it even if it seems completely ridiculous, what
Right.
I'm feeling. So
Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak to any other barriers that you have found in the clients you work with and yourself, to being able to access your intuition. I know you mentioned the
Yeah.
religious piece, which I think is super important too. I think that played a component in my own just disconnection for myself and my own like inner voice, because everything in the religious like community I grew up, everything was so outsourced. Like you went to a certain religious text, you went to pastors. If you went to counseling, it had to be a Christian counselor, like absolutely, it's like you had to go
Mm-hmm.
to the experts that were approved, on their list, in order to like get answers. And so I mean, I remember feeling like, if I was just sitting somewhere, alone by myself, like I wouldn't know what to do. Like I would need to open
Yeah.
up a book on that topic, or go
Right.
ask my, youth leader or whatever. I didn't realize that I had access to it within by myself. So
Mhm.
anyways, I'm just curious if there's some others that come to mind as far as barriers that you have seen.
Yeah. I for so I did some anger coaching, and I think a lot of times when we have no idea how to process our big feelings, those really get in the way. Because I think what happens is like, when you grow up like in an angry household, for example, like, so you just had one parent that was prone to, angry outbursts, then your brain is kind of like, okay, that's at a young age, it's like, that's how we handle things that make us uncomfortable. We get angry. So when you're trying to access these pieces within you, this intuition, and it doesn't go right, quote unquote, the first time, your brain is like, oh, I'm angry. We suck at this. Close down the connection. Right. So as you learn, I think and that's why, processing emotions and going through retraining your brain is so important to me. And it is such a big piece of this because as you can kind of calm your nervous system and your brain down and say, okay, like we can be new at this, then it just comes a little bit easier. And it becomes easier and easier every time you do it. So definitely, learning how to navigate those big emotions is probably the next biggest, besides just kind of like that, just the religious trauma, the cultural too. I think, especially in Western cultures, it's all about like, what do the doctors say? What do your parents say? What does school say? Well, you can't trust yourself because that's not what's, written down in word or whatever. So I do think we're taught not to trust ourselves and not to kind of open up to this connection.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I mean, I feel like that really came up for me. I, just gave birth and I did a free birth. And so, basically it was just my mom and my husband there and no medical professionals or anything like that. And I mean, talk about like, even my mom, who was pretty skeptical at first, was going to be there around the birth time. So I let her know that I was going to be doing a free birth and,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that? And she had a lot of questions and stuff, but I think what's really interesting is like, is it enough to just trust that I feel this is right? Like when I heard about it and I started to listen to all the stories of women that have free birthed all around the world, I was like, this feels like me. This feels like this fits
Oh, I
for
love
me
it.
and how I want to bring my baby in. And I don't have the answers as to, well, what if blah, blah, blah happens? I don't
Mhm.
know. Like, I think I will intuitively know what to do if it does, and I
Yeah.
think like for a lot of people, that's not enough. Like, but you have to have a plan, it's like, well, my plan's following my intuition. That's my plan.
Yeah.
Um, and I agree that especially I think Western cultures, that's a lot more foreign, like to people, that concept. We want to look to like, you know, we want to be able to Google it and get an answer sort of thing.
Mhm.
It's like, we don't, it feels a little bit more scary and uncertain to just rely on intuition, which makes me really interested what you think about when our intuition appears to be off, and or how you separate feeling and intuition, because sometimes we can have really strong emotions and we mistake that for intuition and we follow it and it ends up being like, okay, I don't think that was exactly what I thought was going to happen or turn out.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how you see them as different, because like, are we saying people should follow all their strong emotions? Is that the intuition, or how do you decipher that?
I do think it's for sure a process. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you've got to try it, right? And that's,
Yeah.
that is one of the things that I teach I have a 40-day program. And it's broken up into 10 days, and there is a 10-day or a 5-day part where I have my clients sit down, schedule 30 minutes on their calendar, and all they're doing is following their intuition.
Hmm.
So, if their intuition tells them to go eat a bag of chips or, whatever, they're going to go do that. And then you kind of do get the sense of like, okay, so say my intuition, actually I'm really just hungry or thirsty. And I go eat this bag of chips and it makes me feel gross. Okay, well, maybe that wasn't an intuitive hit. Maybe that was just a feeling hit. Right. And my goodness, I've been doing intuition work for 3 years and I still make, you know, feeling decisions based off of feeling or fear all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't think you're ever going to get it 100% right. But I think that intuition comes in these small moments too, where, like you're at the park playing with your kid and there's something that whispers to you, just like soak in this moment. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's like, and then you can soak that in, and I loved what you said too about how you did, you followed your intuition to the free birth and you did just let that be enough. Like, what if we learned how, as a society, as a culture, as women, to just let that be enough? you know well,
Mm-hmm.
like, how would our lives change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes you won't know for sure if it was intuition or feeling till afterwards, and you have to be
Totally.
okay with that. I think
Mhm.
because I think like the point isn't getting it right. The point is being willing to explore, like just being open
Yeah,
to exploration. I think that's the
totally.
point. Not so much like is it actually right or not. Um, I wonder how you've handled situations, maybe it's higher stake situations, like a relationship you should, that you're not sure you should be in or not, or maybe something's up with your child health wise and you're not sure what the path is, and you have a lot of inputs from the outside saying like this is what you should do, um and it doesn't match like your deep sense in your gut. Like how do you help people navigate that, and how, I mean, have you had that happen, and how did you get through
Yeah.
that?
It's funny that you bring this up. I'm going kind of through this with my daughter. She has like a cross eye.
Mm.
And my husband and doctors have all been like very, very worried about it, right? Um, and and that's the thing too, is sometimes I don't listen to my intuition, right? I'll go along and I'll she's gotten surgery on her eye, and all these things, right? And the whole time my gut is just like, this is not something we need to worry about. Like this is not something we need to worry about, again and again and again. um and I look at her and she's fine. Like we put her through surgery and she's fine. Like, I mean, honestly too, I try to do like what ifs the other way too, of like, okay, well, what if she is fine? Like then am I going to put her through all these surgeries and all these doctor's appointments and all these drops and all this stuff to just, I mean, and if her eye crosses, that's okay, right? Like maybe she needs the eye cross. So I do think it's,
Yeah.
I think, life will change when we all start just like trusting ourselves and teaching our kids how to trust themselves too. I think that's really like why I'm so passionate about this work, is just because I grew up not trusting myself. A lot of my clients are in the same boat as I am, where they just literally had no idea they had a connection to themselves. So, and now they're able to teach like their kids that, right? So, it is scary to like have a doctor to be telling you something and you just know that something's wrong, right? And I would encourage anybody, if you have a doctor and you don't feel like they're telling you the right thing, like go get a second opinion. You know what I mean? Always do that. Trust, always lean back on that trust in yourself, because it is, it's, I don't think it's ever going to be wrong. You know what I mean? I don't like, I think maybe it will not turn out the way that you thought, but I don't think your intuition is ever going to, you know, or you following like this with the intention of like, I am trying to follow my heart. I don't think that's ever going to lead you down a path of, insanity.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point because I personally, like in my own life, if I look through the really strong, intuitive, I think sometimes it's like super, super strong, and other times it's very subtle. And so there is that nuance to it too. But I think there always to me seemed to be a cost of not following it
Mhm.
and a cost if I did, on either side. It's like, and I mean, this is a lot of what I talk about too in my work is the idea or the whole concept of like self-abandonment, or, at the, to please other people and to, give other people that sense of peace, almost that like you're doing all the things the right way, like if it's with your child or whatever, like peace of mind that like, okay, well, she's doing the things that she's supposed to do to make sure her kid's okay, if it's grandma
Totally.
or whoever who's worried about the kid too. um but it's like, what did that cost you to go against your intuition? And in the long run, for myself, like self-abandonment chronically, like actually led to physical, dysfunction in my body on a really severe level. And so like being in my 20s and couldn't even like work because I was so ill. And so I think that that's a really important piece too, is I think it's kind of accumulative. Like as you go
Yeah.
through life, if you're constantly suppressing the inner voice, eventually it catches up to you and comes out sideways, often in like health crisis. Like,
Yeah.
and so I think, I, I mean, even coming to the doctors and like all of that, once I started to dig into that, yes, there's tests that can be run. And I did have like a parasite and thyroid dysfunction, all these things. But I think I also earlier on, I wish I would have had someone say, like, take a pause and like tap into your intuition and ask, what is this really about? Like this health stuff
Yeah.
really about? Um, and what would have come up is like, you've been abandoning yourself like your whole life, like you've been living for other people. And so I think that that's also something that maybe in our whole process of logical and like appointments and all the stuff that we might, I mean, it's completely free to for a minute ask your tuition, like, what's this really about? Like,
Yeah.
I think we
Right.
forget that step,
Yeah.
and yeah, go for it.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting too. Like, yes, like having the awareness and like the no what wherewithal to say like, hey, what's going on? But also too, I think there's this piece of like actually listening for the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, especially when you're new at intuition, the answers aren't gonna come right away. They're gonna
Mm-hmm.
come in the form of like maybe you're like an article that you read, 10 minutes, 30 minutes later. So like being open to those types of things too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some creative, weird ways that it's come to you that you knew that was like, that was my intuition speaking, if like you haven't heard it super clear right away?
Yeah. I there was a good one recently and now it just slipped my mind, but I have a good like last summer I had a friend that posted online and she was like, what's one thing you want to do before the end of the summer? And I was like, just like willy-nilly, I want to go on a boat. And then like at the end of the summer, my husband and I were looking at buying on a boat and we were on this like beautiful lake like riding around and like I just got that my intuition was like, hey, look what you did, like you created this, right?
Mm.
So that has been a big one. And then I did, so after we went through infertility with my daughter, I knew we were going to get pregnant without um medical intervention with my son. Like I knew it was going to
Mm.
happen. And then when that actually did like happen, I remember like, it's so weird. I remember the night that we conceived him and like all the things. And it was such we were in kind of the state of like play. My husband and I, we have been just like had this fun day,
Mm.
just playing and doing all those types of imaginative things. Like we found this, um, we call it our treasure chest of pool toys that the neighbors had left us or the people who lived here before had left us. And then that night like we just still continue to have all the fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when you can follow that type of energy, I think the intuition and the play energy is probably the same. They're on the same vibration. When you
Mm-hmm.
can follow those things, it
Mm-hmm.
leads to magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like you're already primed and ready to listen and to be tuned in when you're in that energy. And yet I know, like, as moms, like, here we are, we both have young children. That can be so hard to tap into because you're like trying to keep everybody alive and your household running and not sleeping and, trying to make sure you have your teeth brushed and took a shower today. So it's like,
Right. Yeah.
so how on earth do we incorporate practices or just even an environment internally and around us that keeps us open to those playful moments where intuition can slip in more easily than when we're
Yeah.
in stress and go and anxiety and all of that.
Yeah. I think it is so important for new moms to, whenever they can, just, I mean, honestly, just take a deep breath. You know what I mean? If you can just, because it's so on the go, right? And you're just sleep deprived. And they're like, I mean, I wish I could tell you, yeah, go put the baby down when you need it and, go take a shower or whatever. But like, that is so unrealistic. And it's infuriating too. Some people that just like I remember one time, my neighbor behind me, she's a little bit older, and I said something always like, oh yeah, the baby got up at 5 a.m. She's like, well, at least he slept till 5. And I was like, come on, like, thanks for
Yeah.
the support. But and sometimes I think for new moms too, it's not easy to say like, I'm drowning, I need help. You know what
Yes.
I mean?
I just said that earlier
So
this week. I'm
yeah,
drowning to my husband.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's like, and I do think it's hard and it sucks. And I think for me, like one of the things that really did help was like, and maybe this is like, I always joke that I gaslight myself sometimes because I'm like, I'll get through this. Like, it's not always going to be this bad. It's a season, you know, those types of things. But I think really when you can just remind yourself to like take a deep breath, try to check in with your body, see, you know, where you're at. If it is a nap that you need, you know, just trying your damnedest to do that or get some water or whatever. But I think too, when we are newborns and sleep deprived, I do feel like our spirit and our intuition is like surrounding us, right? Because we just brought a new soul into this world. Like,
Oh
so
yeah.
I do think it is a lot almost easier, especially when it comes to like what is going on with your baby. You do know more. Like those things are coming in and they're just a little bit, it's like the channel is a little bit more open, I think, during that time. And that's why I think it is so interesting to really start diving deeper into your intuition when you are a new mom and in those couple years like after, because I think you can really keep that channel open effectively instead of like closing it back off maybe like we would have.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really strong in regards to the baby and maybe where it could like use more love and attention is like in regards to like what you need, like pausing to
Yeah.
like hear that. Cause I agree, it is very strong. And what's so weird is like, I was just thinking about this like in preparation on my walk this morning to talk to you, but I was thinking about how there's this weird idea that everybody looks to the mom to have all the answers anyways, which is really fascinating. It's like yesterday my son was crying for like 2 hours straight and it was a very harrowing morning and
Yeah.
I did all the things and nothing was working. And I, text my husband or whatever. He's like, well, what do you think's wrong with him? I was like, well, like how, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's like, they look to you or they always, the baby starts, they bring them back to you. Like you're going to have the solution or the answer, even if they've already been fed and changed and all the things. And
Yeah.
so there's just like this notion that maybe it's because we grow them in our bodies where we just have this like deep, connection to them. But I don't know. I think that there is that, I definitely feel that with my son too, that I don't have the answers, but like really what they need is your presence. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that in motherhood too, there's so much like feeling like you need to be able to multitask and like balance all these things. And it just doesn't, I think when you have the mindset that it's not enough to just be present for your baby and you have to be doing all these other things, like I think that's where the drowning really takes, you
Totally.
know, I think that's where that kicks in, that sense of drowning. And what's helped me is just to be really like to slow down and just take it one like moment at a time because it's like we're rushing to be able to like put them down for a nap so we have a minute. It's like okay. But then like yesterday he took a really long afternoon nap and I was actually like, "Oh wow, when are you going to wake up?" 2 hours later I was
Right.
like bored of him sleeping.
Yeah.
So it's
You
like,
want them
so
back,
we're
huh?
hurrying for what? Like for the next what?
Yeah.
So it's like, and missing the moment in, the moment right there. I think that for me has helped me when I can do that, not feel quite as drained and exhausted all the time either. And then as, I mean, you balance working and, having your own business and motherhood too. And there's just social media, the love hate thing with social media. It's like you see all these moms running businesses and you're like, they look like it makes it look so easy. And it's like, but I've changed the third poopy diaper in 30 minutes. So it's like I
Right.
don't know how you get anything done because this is what I do all day. So I
Right.
mean it looks so easy and then you're like, well, what am I doing wrong that it's not easy? um
I
so I don't know,
think
I
that's
think
such a, yeah,
yeah.
like because that's how we turn it, right? It's like, what am I doing wrong?
Hmm.
I think that's like that internal too, that is so draining, right? It's like we think we're doing something wrong. So then our brain spins that whole story of like, we're not enough, we're not doing enough. So yeah, when you can really tap into that presence with your kid, I mean, and especially too when they're newborns, like they change so fast, that time goes by so fast. And when we are like just kind of rushing and like, oh my god, I have to do this to be the quote unquote good mom, to make sure I'm following all the rules, right, and doing all the things right. It is so draining because we are looking to everything outside of us to make us feel like we are doing a good job.
Hmm. and yet like intuitively know, I know it's enough to love him and to be present and to change those diapers and like,
Yeah.
to nurse on demand like that, because that to me is important. Like, I think that is really enough. Like
Mhm.
he's not going to remember if I took out the garbage, he's going to remember
Right.
if I like was attentive. Like that's actually what's forming his secure attachment in the world. So it
Yeah,
has
right.
nothing
Like
to do
he
with the
doesn't care
garbage,
about the
at
garbage. Yeah.
all. So,
Or the
um,
messy kitchen or if you stink.
exactly, exactly. Which I think I was just going back to the whole emotion versus intuition. I think one way that I also like differentiate that is like, I think your intuition, that voice feels really calm in your body. Like it's a very grounding. Um, it's not a I think from my experience, it's just like a really deep knowing without a lot of charge. Maybe it's a strong pull,
Right.
like you feel a strong
Yeah.
pull to something, but it's not super charged emotionally. And I
Yeah.
think um if especially in motherhood when you are sleep deprived and stuff like that, I think it's helpful to get yourself to take that 5 minutes or whatever where someone grabbed the baby for a little bit or 15 minutes to, like, for me it's like getting on my yoga mat and doing some restorative yin practice to get back into my grounded energy, and
Yeah.
then I can pop back up and things feel a little bit more certain, like, oh, okay, this is
Mhm.
really all that I need to do today, and or what I want to do next with the baby or whatever, versus just feeling that desperate, anxious,
Mhm.
um, yeah, energy. So I don't know if would you agree with
Yeah,
that as far as like how it feels in your
totally.
body, the intuition?
Oh my,
Oh, did you mute yourself? Can you still hear me?
did I?
Oh,
Oh,
here you are. Okay, you're back.
can you hear me?
You might want to back
Okay.
up.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, I wanted to go back to something that you actually said about your free birth when you said, um, you know, you were like, I don't have all the answers to all your questions, but this is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that that is so different from like when you make an emotionally charged decision, you're scraping for those answers, right? And you're like, oh, I'm sorry. Hi. Sorry, 3 year old. Um, but yeah, you're scraping for like the what ifs, and you really want to answer those questions, and it is more of like this like pulling you energy versus like what you were saying. It's something that's like intuition is so grounding,
Mm-hmm.
and it really like it just calms your brain too. I would say like you're just like, oh well, I don't know how I'm going to move forward. I don't know, what I'm going to do if you know if whatever happens, like I don't have those answers, and I'm still okay with my decision. It's a really good intuition tell.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I just noticed the time. So I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay, we should wrap things up here. It's been really
Yeah,
fun. I could talk to you for a lot longer. It's
I
been
know.
so
I feel like
fun
that too.
to connect with you. So, and I think for a lot of mamas, it's going to really resonate too. So thank you for your time. And if you could share, just to wrap up, where people can go to find you and connect with you and work with you, that would be awesome.
Yeah. My Instagram is the best place to find me. So it's the handle is at Sarah Mertzlufft. Maybe we could put that in the show notes because it
Mm-hmm.
can be hard to spell.
Yes.
But yes, yeah. So Instagram is the best place to find me. I'm always on there, checking DMs and loving conversations like these.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, I will definitely link in the show notes your Instagram handle. And yeah, I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks so much for being willing to
Yeah.
chat with us on your Friday
Yeah.
morning.
Thanks for having me, Erika. I love the conversation.
Yes.
Okay.